Jodie Crowe. Thank you so much for joining me on the Unscripted Podcast. This has been a work in progress for several weeks, but we finally make it work. Really excited to have y'all on. So that everyone knows, you are our current Connect Group directors. I don't think sometimes people piece that together, especially when we're on Sundays, but you took over that role early last year, and it's been wonderful. We've been seeing so much fruit. I was thinking this morning as I was backtracking through our history together, you have a unique entrance to Revive in the sense that you didn't show up on a Sunday morning first, correct?
No.
Which most people do when they attend a church. You showed up on a Friday night for an event, a service that was pretty much unformatted at that time. We called it a stretch night. I have worship. We go deeper into the word. It was a little unformatted. So I was hoping we could start there. I'm curious. Give me just a little bit of background. How did you find the church? And then piggybacking off of your first experience, I am so curious, what was the conversation on the way home?
Okay. So at the time, I was serving as a youth pastor in a church in about 45 minutes out. We'd been looking for another church, a base church, because she couldn't make that travel very far. And so she had been stalking Revive on Instagram because she watched the snippets and stuff that was coming out, and it kind of hit her feed, so she started watching it.
Christine Gruendecke.
Mm-hmm. So we actually played volleyball with Christine for about for quite a few years. Knew the kids. They kind of went in and out, and so we. She goes, well, they're having a thing on Friday night, because I would always serve on Sundays and Wednesdays. And she says, they're having a thing on Friday night, so we should probably go check this church out. I said, okay. And so we come in on a stretch night. It's one of the nights where you're just sitting up front, and, I pay real close attention to biblical standards. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. Is it biblical? Can I disprove it with the Bible? Is he even talking out of the Bible? So no real red flags or anything went up for me, So I'm sitting back there and I'm like, that was good, And so I'll touch a little bit on that conversation on the way home. She was like, well, what do you think? I was like, well, that was really good teaching. I took notes, and it's been a while since I had taken notes. And so she is more of the worship. She said the music was phenomenal. And so to my point, I'll say how I felt. The biblical teaching was strong. It was a deeper dive than you hear at any. It was a deeper dive into the scripture where it made me rethink some things I have been taught or learned. And it made me review scripture that I hadn't reviewed in a while, which to me was a big plus. I have been in the ministry for 20-something years, taught several classes, and, pastored and interim pastored and youth pastored. And for me to go back into a Bible and feel challenged was new, for a while, And so for me, that was a big plus for me, because I enjoy challenges. I enjoy being challenged on things that, I've read that scripture 14 times. I've never seen that. You get that epiphany sometimes when you read it by yourself, but when you get challenged that way by somebody else, it always intrigues me. And so that was my plus. What was your thoughts?
I was looking for more. I felt like we were only surface, and I felt like God was calling me to more. I wanted to know more about him. I wanted to know more about the Bible. I had a hunger. And I seen the feed come across Christine's story. Y'all had done something. She posted it, and then I went to the website. And then the stretch nights came up, and it talked about deeper dives. Like, this is a study. This isn't your normal. And I'm like, this is where I think we need to start. And I come in, and you're sitting down, which is not normal for somebody who's teaching, because you just got done with a fast or was in the middle of a fast.
That's right, yeah.
You're fasting. And I remember going, I've never heard anybody talk about fasting the way you had talked about it at that time. And the things that you were talking about, by the end of the night, I just wanted more. Like it's like when you don't eat and then somebody gives you a little bit of bread.
Right.
And you're like, I want more of that.
Yeah.
This is not, I want more.
That's incredible. My first recollection, I'll be totally honest now that we're friends, was Jodie looked like she was so happy to be here. Craig looked like he was hunting down your ex-lover if he thought he would find him here. Because your face just... Now that I know you, we have that similarity where if I'm in a foreign environment, I am watching everything. I'm taking it all in, and I'm processing silently. And so I usually have that resting face that people think I'm angry. You have the same thing, not on purpose. It's just in a new environment, right? We're not like that anymore, thankfully, when you walk into the church building. But I do remember thinking, man, I don't think this guy wants to be here. But then you showed him up again. I thought, well, maybe he does. Or his wife dragged him. I don't know. Either way. But no, that's really cool. So let me ask on those lines. You kind of opened up something that's I'm curious about. So y'all have been in ministry together for over 20 years at this point. Mm. And I mean, you've lived a whole life, which we can touch on that too. But both of you just said some level of, we were going a little bit deeper. What is it that stopped that depth where when you walked in you thought, okay, this is what we need? And I don't mean that to be disrespectful, but I know, as myself included, when you're in ministry for that long, it becomes so easy when you're the guy or the girl, but even for just a normal congregant, to just coast for a while. So do you know how you found yourself in that spot?
So I started out when I got to Texas teaching a men's class. And in my men's class was the senior pastor. At the time, all the deacons. I mean, I was the youngest person in the room. This was 20 years ago.
It's like throwing the intern into the CEO boardroom and going, hey, give us a presentation, kid.
So and I was asked by the gentleman running that committee, hey, Craig, I'd like you to teach the men's class. And I'm thinking, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want. And I walk in and sit down. It's, if you imagined a room with 50-plus-year-old men, all with their Bibles open, all the King James, every single one of them got a button-up shirt, and I walk in as a 20-year-old with, 30-year-old with a hat on, and I sit down, and they're all just looking at me like, what are you going to teach me, boy? That was my proving ground of teaching. And so I would read something, and it would be an argument. I don't agree with your translation, And so I was thrown into the fire. But I come to learn that most people are very surface level biblical scholars. In other words, they repeat what they're told instead of studying for themselves. And as I grew into relationships with these men, they figured out that, I wasn't trying to teach them what they were taught. I was trying to teach them something different. Not changing what the Bible says, but a different outlook on it. And so I gained their respect. I ended up becoming interim youth pastor and then youth pastor at that church for quite some time. I think we served there for 10, 12 years probably.
Wow.
And so, and it's the same way with, and that's probably why we enjoyed youth so much, was because it was such a fresh mind.
Yeah, students just absorb it.
Yeah. And so we can get them to critically think through the Bible. We want them to question it. We want them to say, I don't know if I trust this. Well, that's good. You shouldn't. You should trust what I said. You should prove me wrong. Here's the Bible. And so getting youth to learn that way was so exciting for me. That was neat. But then you get into the point where you feel like you've taught everything out of the Bible. You feel like people, you talk to somebody and they ask a question. You're like, I just taught you this 4 months ago. Like, I have notes that tell you this question. You listen to me at all, and so that part gets frustrating, and I guess that's kind of where we were before we came to Revive. I think we were in that, and I don't want to call it a rut, but more of we need to be fed. We'd been feeding everybody for 20 years and we had served everything, and this is a hard thing to say, but sacrifice time with our kids for the teaching people and reaching out and serving a church, to where we're like, we need to be fed. So we stepped out of ministry. I said, we're just going to go to this church, Revive. And I said, we're just going to be fed. And so we were here about a year before we were approached here. But that was nice. It was nice to get fresh outlooks on things. It was nice to be taught. It was nice to feel that feeling that you get when you walk into Revive, where it was more, you're not all button up shirts and pleated pants. So
not that was a bad thing.
No, not that it's a bad thing.
A little stuffy sometimes.
Yes. And so for us was a fresh look.
Yeah. Do you agree, Jodie? What was your perspective?
He was the one who did all the ministry. I was the support person. So like if we needed to do meals and stuff like that, that's what I did. So as far as like the teaching and the learning, that wasn't my wheelhouse at that time. I helped direct some children's musicals and stuff. But again, that's teaching Bible stories and kids are acting them out, productions, plays, and just investing in kids. And that is easy to do. But being fed, I was not. And so I think I was stunted a little bit. And then we got to a point where I just felt like I needed more.
So was that a conversation in the background before you came to Revive? Were y'all having that discussion of, hey, I feel stunted, or hey, I feel like we're not being fed? Or was it just something you sense?
More of a sense. I think we just grind through a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think it was more of, she would make the comments, I don't feel like I'm being fed. And as the priest of your home, you're kind of like, what do you mean you're not being fed? Right.
Open your mouth. Here's pork.
You should come to my sermon. But, and so I had to step back and really look at a self-examination of where I was. And I was very in a rut, very, I got books and notes, handwritten things out for the last, 15 years. I could, give me 5 minutes, I'll have you a sermon, and I didn't like that feeling. I liked it when I first started, when I would spend, 30 hours writing something and then crumble it up the night before because it's not what God wanted to say.
Yep.
And rewrite it, be up at 1:00 in the morning and Jodie come past me, are you still up? And be like, yeah. And I'm out there typing away, So it was more of a personal relationship that, you feed everybody so much so long, and you become that vessel, and it's so fulfilling for you to watch God fill you with that knowledge and that wisdom, and you can spread it out. But I felt like I was getting to a point where I was stunted. It wasn't, it's almost like I reached a capacity, I wouldn't say love for others or care for others, but it was more of a, why don't you listen to me? Why aren't you doing this? I told you that 15 times, and now you come to me and ask why you're in such this big deal in your life. I'm like, well, I told you.
We get jaded.
Yeah. And it was, and so realizing that, I realized I needed to step out. I needed to just I need to go back to being in the congregation, submitting myself under a pastor, working on my family, my relationship with my wife, being the priest I'm supposed to be at home, the protector, the provider, concentrating more on that instead of concentrating on other people.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of stuck.
Well, we're glad it did.
Well, and I learn differently than he does.
Oh, I know. Now, anybody watching this podcast may not know that, but let me tell you, I know. Could you explain that for people?
So his sermons are really well done and very informative. I learn on a different level. I have to ask a million questions, and I have to be able to analyze absolutely everything and bring it down all the way down to the roots. And you don't have time when you're on a sermon to be able to go down to the roots of it. Because I've got well, then why did he do that? Then why did he do that? Then why did we go here? Why did they go there? And you just don't have time. And he definitely didn't have time to be I'm teaching the youth kids, all the things that he was doing, because he was really, really, really invested. And so I felt like I was his helpmate. Instead of learning and growing in my faith, I was there to support him, and to build him up.
Can I ask, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, I just want to ask a clarifying question. Was that something that was, how do I say this? Was that something that was integrated into your life because of the church environment or the denomination you grew up in? Or was it just something that it felt like it came natural? He, theologian in the house, I'm going to focus on ministry 100%. You're the helpmate, behind the scenes. I'm going to take care of these little things. Was it natural, or do you feel like you inherited that from a different perspective, or your pastor or other family members or things like that?
Well, when I wasn't always a pastor.
Oh yeah, we're going to get into that.
Yeah,
for sure.
So a lot of people who see me sitting on the stage claiming to be a pastor is probably, if they didn't know me before, if they knew me before age 24, they'd probably be laughing. That's not the same guy. And I'm not. I am a changed person. But, I was saved early in life, but I didn't always live that life of a Christian. We met and got married, and she was taking the kids to church. I was sitting at home because I worked 6 days a week, 70, 80 hours. Sunday was my rest day. So I'd sit on the couch, piddle with stuff around the house. I was fixing cars in the garage and working a full-time job. And, I'd wake up in the morning, and I still remember her reading her Bible school lesson that she was teaching the kids, because at the time she was teaching kids. And I would just watch her, and she would read through her study, and then she would go get the kids. I'd help her get out of the house, go to church, and I'd sit on the couch and watch TV for a while. And there was that talk that this has to change. And so I went to church, and got, realizing, okay, I need to take this step again. I need to get back into church type of conversation with myself. And shortly within a year or so, I was ordained. Then we were called to Texas because of my layman's job, not my pastoral positions. So we came to Texas, and just right off the bat was straight into ministry, men's ministry.
How old were you when that happened?
We moved here in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
So 30.
Almost 20 years ago now. Wow.
Yeah, 30. So yeah, I was probably 25, 26 when I got my butt off the couch and went, because I'd lived a lifetime before 26 that most, some people knew me up to age 26 would realize I'd lived a lifetime already. So I felt,
yeah. Can we touch on that a little bit? I don't want people thinking, man, Pastor Craig, he's just been a good guy the whole time.
no, I wasn't.
Can you give us a little And I'm also very nervous to ask that question because every time I talk to you about your past, I hear a new story. I think you've repeated one story twice, and that's it. Every other time, there's always a new story. It's almost like, who is this man? You're the Dos Equis man. That's who you are. It's always a new thing. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because you met when you were how old? Were you still teens?
I was 20.
She was 20. I asked her to marry me on her 21st birthday, actually.
Okay.
And I married her on her 23rd.
Okay, so pre Jodie. Let's go back for that,
Okay.
and then we'll go into yours as well. But give us a little background on
all right.
the life of Craig.
I was born in Evansville, Indiana. Very humble beginnings.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, the house we lived in was rolled into place. To give you an idea, it wasn't a trailer. It was rolled on logs because it was the next door neighbors, and they were putting up a new house. So they rolled that over and set it on concrete blocks.
Never heard that. Yeah, I loved it. I love this.
And so, it was about 2.5 acres, and it was just a goat ranch. And if you know what a goat ranch is, you'd understand. It's just hilly. It was terrible. It's horrible to mow grass. And so my dad created that into kind of a homestead, what most people would think of a homestead nowadays. At the time, I had no clue. I thought I was the richest kid in the world because I had all of this to go do what I wanted to do. My dad was very, very, very strong individual. You know, he was the man's man. He was probably born 100 years too late. He should have been born in the Old West. He was just that tough of a man.
Was he in the military?
No.
Okay.
He was actually colorblind. He was drafted to Vietnam, but he was colorblind.
Okay.
And so he got out, not having to serve that. But he did, he went to high school during, we're talking about during segregation times. Everybody's starting to come back together. So his life was pretty rough. He come from a pretty large family. My mom come from a pretty large family. They were high school sweethearts. And man, he would, he died when I was 10, but I remember times when at 7, 8 years old, he would be going to work and he would say, I need that wood pile moved over there. He would tell me something like, because the stuff on the bottom's getting damp and it needs to dry out. So I needed all the stuff on the bottom to be, on the top to be on the bottom, just to keep me busy, because he knew how intelligent, ADD, and crazy I was as a child. And my upbringing up to 10 years old was probably the most, I don't understand how he did it. Like kept me busy. I never thought I wasn't loved. I mean, my dad, when he told you were going to get a butt whooping, it was a serious one. But at the same time, every night he kissed me, told me he loved me, tucked me in. We didn't go to church. I had family members that ran churches. That's a different part of my story. But, and so up until 10 years old, it was a dream. We went to the store once a month, and that was to pick up toothpaste, deodorants, shoes if we needed them. We didn't buy a lot of food there because if we didn't hunt it, grow it, kill it, we didn't eat it, And so my upbringing was, I knew how to butcher animals before I don't remember how not to. I don't even remember being taught that. It was just something you got in there and did it with your dad. Dad would hand you a chicken or a squirrel or whatever, and he'd say, hey, I need this ready for cooking, and you just did it. I just don't remember not doing it. And so that was just different to me. And then when I get older, I realized, wow, people would have said, Craig, you were poor, because when I was hungry, I just go get something to eat.
Yep.
My grocery store was the woods. Yep. It still is, not for her, but it still is. And so Dad died when I was 10. And that's really when trauma started for me, major traumas in life. And so my mom tried. She was a single mom of 2 boys that, if you've ever met my brother, you think I'm rough around the edges. You know, we were probably the hardest kids to be a parent of. And just with fights and, you know, all the things that we did throughout our childhood. Mom had, you know, she tried for a couple years, then she started dating. When she lost dad, she lost everything, you know. And so she had boyfriends that didn't treat young boys very well. You know, there was a lot of abuse, a lot of drugs came into the house. A lot of things to that nature. My brother moved out. He was 17. I moved out when I was 14. Mom actually ended up moving in with me. I was about just after 15 at the time. She moved back in with me because she had lost the house. And, you know, she ended up dying in a car accident when I was 16. And so in those moments of life, I didn't really have any parents. Mom wasn't around. You're talking about a 10-year-old to a 14-year-old around any drugs I wanted, any outside influences I wanted. No one told me no. You know, the local sheriff knew me by my first name, you know. He would always show up at the house because he also knew my dad. And so he would show up at the house. And so that was my life up until about, 16 years old. And then I kind of felt free a little bit, like my responsibility of taking care of my mom and all that stuff was kind of gone. I got a little bit of an inheritance from her, enough to bury her and things like that. Had some money. I locked it up until I was 18, so no one could touch it. I tried doing the whole school and being the good kid and stuff like that. I did graduate high school. But then I got in some pretty good trouble between that 16 and 18-year-old age.
And I can see Jodie's reaction to everything you're saying right now. It's so fun.
And I stood in front of a judge, and he couldn't tell me I had to go to the military. But he said, because he is a small town, he knew me, and he said, "Craig, I'm looking at your rap sheet right now." And he said, I'm going to continue this for 1 week. And you come back and be, you need to be enlisted in some armed forces, or I'm going to send you to jail for a while. And I was like, how long? Wrong question to ask a judge. And he made the comment, you can do 8 for the state or 4 for the court. It's up to you.
Wow.
And I said, yes, sir. Joined the military. And I was, with the trauma and stuff I had seen up to that point in my life, I was very, very angry, Even at 12, my cousin picked me up and took me to a youth event, and I got saved at that time. But from 12 to 17-ish, I felt abandoned. I felt like, where were you when this guy walked into my room late at night? Where were you when, this guy left me to die in a ditch? Where were you when, where were you when my mom told me, I loved you, I'll be home, and she never came back, And so I was very angry. And the military had ways of utilizing that very well. So that added to a lot more trauma in my life. Became a single father at age 20. And that was my exit out of the military. And was single dad for about 2 years. I tried to make that work. I asked her to be a mom or a wife or something, do something. And that she couldn't be either, which that's all right. And so single dad for a couple years. And then I met Jodie, and she kind of got this outlook on me like, oh, he's a single dad, he's got a job. I'm not going to talk for her, but there's probably a lot she didn't know about at the time. Yeah. And so it was a gift basket she didn't want. And so we were single parents at the time. We started dating. We did everything backwards. I knew she was the one I was praying for because I'd gotten back into some prayer time and things like that. I knew she was the one I was praying for. Asked her to marry me on her 21st birthday. We had already, when she met me, I was living in the back of a gun store. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that sounds weird, but it was a 4-bedroom house in the back of a gun store. I'm like, why is this not perfect for me?
Sounds like you're in Nirvana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we, she moved in. One night she came home, and I'm still in the small town, so I'm still known. We come home, and there's some dead animals on my porch. And she goes, "What's that?" And I said, "It looks like a couple deer." And she said, "Why are they dead?" And I said, "Well, I hope they are." And I said, "I imagine one of my cousins killed too many, and he knew he just dropped them off." And she goes, "Well, what are you going to do with them?" I was like, "Eat them." And she's like, "No, we're not." And so that was some of the first glimpses of my life that she had saw. You know, my brother would come get me. We'd go hunting, and we'd come home, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And we're skinning squirrels. And she goes, "What do you mean skinning squirrels?" And we're like, "Well, that's what you do after you shoot them." "They're dead?" "Well, I hope so." You know, so these are little glimpses she would get into my life that she didn't happen when we first met. And so we moved in together. We got married. We actually bought a house before we got married, and then we got married. Chase was born before we got married. And then we kind of leveled out and started getting things straight. And then she is going to church, and I'm sitting at home.
Wow.
And most of that was probably, man, I don't know if I'm saying feeling sorry for myself or not feeling worthy. That's probably the correct statement. Because I always felt called to something with God. But I always felt like I let him down a lot. You know, I always felt like, how can I serve you with what I've done in my past, with what I've done in the military? And it took a lot of turning to figure out that wasn't, that's not why he loves me.
Yeah.
It took a long time for me to grasp that.
Yeah.
And so she calls me off the couch, and she finally, there was a couple talks, because I had self-medicated a lot, to forget a lot of the stuff and a lot of the past. And she told me, she said, "I love you. I'm not raising my kids around this. And so you have to make a decision." And so I did. And that time I set the alcohol down. I started going to church. And then I felt as God started removing the vices and things in my life, he started giving me little things to do. And then the pastor's trying to get my attention one day. "You need to tell Craig to call me." I'm like, "Why do I need to call the pastor?" He's like, "I don't know. He just told me to tell you to call him." And so I called him, and he asked me to, that I have been requested or applied, or however that worked, to be a deacon at the church. I'm like, "A deacon? I don't even know what a deacon is." And so I started doing studies, and I got ordained that year. About a year and a half later, we ended up moving to Texas. So, and that's when my life started as far as in the ministry. And so it was quite a while back.
What is your background? I am so curious. I mean, I know he gave a full, 18-year span. I'm going to make the assumption it probably doesn't look like it. So what is a little bit of your background?
Absolutely the opposite. No dead animals. Absolutely no squirrels, deer. No even deer heads on the wall. Absolutely nothing. My mother fished.
Of course, she with dead animals.
Well, and I wasn't involved in it. She'd go fishing. She'd come. She'd clean it. She'd eat it, and that's great. I had no dealing in it. And so I grew up in Florida, and there's so much more things to do down there than the country. We have beaches. We have other things. And so I spent most of my time in the water. My mom and dad did not go to church. And so we would have the bus that would pick you up for Sunday school. They'd pick you up, and the way they got you inside the bus was candy. Full size, not the
I have warnings about that.
no. not the small size, but like the full size. And so we would get on, like, it was a school bus. And they'd take us to school and they'd bring us back. And so that was kind of, and my parents didn't go. It was me and my brother. And then fast forward, I went to maybe 1 or 2 youth camps because somebody invited me, and that was it. That was my span of in the church. Growing up, mom and dad both outside working. I had my cousins around. My grandmother passed when I was in the 5th grade, so that was a little bit traumatic because of what happened there. I was on the dance team. I worked 3 jobs. I worked at Disney World. I went to high school. I worked at amusement parks. Like, I was all about working and career, and this is what I wanted to do. And then I got pregnant. I tried to go into the military, and because of my asthma, they said I couldn't. And so I ended up pregnant. And so I moved to Indiana, which is where all of our family's from.
Okay.
So my family is from there, and his family is from there. So that's how I met Craig, was through his sister-in-law.
Mm-hmm. Was she like, hey, I want you to meet this guy, like intending to try to get y'all connected, like to date? Or was it just, hey, here's a nice guy that you would enjoy meeting as a friend?
She said, I want you to meet my brother-in-law.
That was it?
And I was like, what do you mean brother-in-law? Like, currently brother-in-law? And she's like, I think they're divorced, but he's my brother-in-law. I was like, okay. I'm new to the area. Sure. I mean, I was born there, but then I came back. And so I was like, okay. It took us 7 tries. The 7th try, I said, this is it.
Yeah.
We're not. This is the final ditch effort. And he showed up.
Actually, you showed up to my house.
But you showed up to your own house.
Behind the gun store.
Behind the gun store.
And I know it doesn't seem this way, that I was kind of shy, kicking the ground. I'm like, this smoking hot woman ain't gonna want nothing to do with me. And she asked me out. She says, so you're gonna get my number or what? And I was like, what? Yes, of course I am. And so first date and second date, and it was just, at the time I was actually going back to a hydraulics class, and so I was at school at night, and it was the whole giddy about calling her. You know, as soon as I'd get a break, I'd run out there and call her, and I'd get picked on by the other guys. You know, they'd be like, "You talking to Jodie?" I was like, "Shut up."
Yeah.
You know, and
you have to clarify, because there might be some younger people watching. This is before the days where you could stalk somebody on Instagram.
yeah,
They would text somebody. There was no text message. There was no internet going on at widespread. So you literally had to pick up a phone, physical phone.
yeah. I would go out to someone's cubicle, and I would dial the 9 to get out and call her.
Yeah.
Hopefully she's at home. Of course, she was waiting, not acting like she was. She'd have somebody answer the phone, but I know she's waiting on my call. So,
Yeah, you made sure nobody was on the phone. If you knew you had a phone call coming in, you're like, Dad, get off my phone. Mm-hmm. You know, or nobody's, the internet, because the dial-up use the telephone.
Yeah.
And you're like, get off the internet.
So I'm curious, Jodie.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know about, well, when you get married, do you know most of his background?
No.
The trauma that's gone on? So it's after you get married that he starts sharing this? Or was it after you got off the couch that you started sharing that?
I always, I mean, she knew about mom and dad. She didn't really know about some of the things that happened in between dad and mom. She definitely didn't know a lot about the military, because I just locked that into an area. I didn't share that. I didn't really start sharing that till after some serious counseling. because it was like, it's no big deal. And the counselor was like, that's a huge deal. And we started talking about some of that stuff. So
Probably about 2018.
Yeah.
So recent.
wow. Yeah. So it was very recent. 2015 to 2018, probably a tremendous amount of counseling and stuff coming out. And like why am I so two-faced is probably the correct word. Like, everybody saw happy Craig, and only she saw depressed, angry Craig, you know. And then I went to some counseling, actually supporting one of our kids, just taking, you know, her back and forth with counseling, and the counselor wanted to counsel, you know, the whole family.
Yeah.
And so I would sit in a small session, and of course she would pick and get a little bit out, and she says, let's talk about that a little bit. And I'm like, why do we need to talk about that? You know? And so she unraveled that whole, you know, stuff that I had stashed away so far. And then, you know, now I'm very open with it, and very, you know, I realize people heal from it and things like that. And I wasn't embarrassed of it. It's just, I didn't want to feel that anymore, you know? And it was like, she's like, you're going to feel it. You just don't know what it is. And so I had locked a lot of that stuff away.
Do you feel like a lot of men coming out from war do that same thing? Just lock it into a cabinet, hit within the recesses of their mind so that they can kind of just operate through society for a season?
I do, but more the olders, you know, they do what's called a debriefing. So especially if you do a tour, you go through any kind of after action report, you know, they sit you in a little room and they interview you, and they, you know, they ask you how you felt about it, those kind of questions. My debriefing from what I had done was probably about a month, and they were like, clean bill of health.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I'm okay with that, because at the time I was a single dad, and I just needed to get to be, you know, to that point where I didn't have to report anymore, you know. And that was more important to me than what they were doing. So I answered the questions like I knew it needed to be answered, and just kind of locked that away. And so,
yeah. So what? Sorry, Jody, I kind of got off track from what I intended to ask you. But so you didn't know all this is going on, but things start unraveling, and then you're seeing the side of Craig that, you know, when you're dating, as we all understand, when you're dating, you see a side of somebody that's very different than when you get married. And I like to say, you know, you got dookie drawers on the floor, right? Like all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, who is this person? I'm so curious, what is it that kept you pursuing him and saying, I need you to get off the couch. This has got to change. Was it, well, actually, I don't want to phrase that because I don't want to accidentally manipulate your answer. But what was it that kept you saying, okay, I'm going to keep pursuing this until I see it change? The reason I ask is because there's a lot of women who won't pursue it all. They nag. And you might have been nagging. Maybe that Craig didn't clarify that, but you obviously were making an effort. Mm-hmm. What is that difference? Because I know a lot of women who just say, oh, he's just being a man. It's just the way men are. And I just want him to be happy. They kind of shrink down behind the scenes. But you sound like you had to step up and say, look, something's going to change.
That's a really good question. I hadn't given that a whole lot of thoughts. When we had our children and I started going to church, I had a women's leader that challenged me. She said, I want you to teach. And I said, I'm not a teacher. I will be
Wait, I'm sorry. So this has been an ongoing conversation all these years? Because I'm pretty sure we've had a similar... Okay, anyway.
Yes.
We'll take that off camera. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I said, I'm not a teacher. I'm background. And I'll be more than happy to assist, to prepare, do all the things. Because at the time when we got married, I was more independent. I was more, I would work 3 jobs. I would take care of my child. I would take care of the house. Sleep was not an option. And so when I married him, he's like, listen, Linda, you need to bring this down a little bit and say 1 job. And I need you to support me. I need you to be here. I need you to be here for the kids. I need you to be here for me. I need you to be here at the house. And so I had to change my mindset.
Was that hard?
It was very hard. Very, very hard. We had multiple discussions about it. You know, I'd be working 2 or 3 jobs, and he would call me and say, I want you home. I miss you. This is where you need to be. And so I had to make a decision. Just like he had to make a decision with alcohol, I had to make a decision with that. And so I said, okay, then I need you to supplement. Like, I don't mind supplementing. Then I need you to either work overtime, or we got to be able to make the bills match. And he also was like, well, but everything doesn't have to be perfect. So we both had to come to this level playing field. So we both evened each other out really well. Then we started church. And so I did that. And he saw me struggle. And I was like, my Bible study, I'm like, I don't understand this. But I would still read it. And I think he saw me with the kids. And he saw me with me trying to be intentional. Even though I didn't feel comfortable, I was still trying to do something for the Lord. And so I would come home and just exhausted. Because when you're trying to do 3 little ones, trying to help teach, trying to, you know, because it was my grandmother's church, trying to be the perfect granddaughter, like all these things were very taxing. But I wouldn't have changed it for the world. There was a couple times I come home and said, I can't do this by myself. I need help. And so I don't know if it was nagging other than I need your help. I need you there with me.
Not nagging. Sounds like a desperate cry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it took took quite a while. And I prayed. I prayed a lot.
That, yeah.
And then the pastor in the church, I sat down and talked with him. And so he started praying. And so we had a lot of behind the scenes prayer going for him.
Courtney had no chance.
Nope. No, the Holy Spirit was going to snatch him up. But he fought it until he didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think of my guardian angel, got bullet holes. He's all burned up. When I get up there, he's just going to look at me and go, thank God you're here. I don't know if fighting it's the right word. Scared of it probably more. Mostly because I didn't, I don't know how to say this. I don't feel worthy. So when I got called to be a youth pastor, when I felt that calling, I was actually at my youngest son's, who was at a kids camp, not a youth camp, but a kids camp. And they had a study for adults. You know, it's like, hey, take a break. Let's get into Romans. You know, let's do this. And it was one of those go around the room and write your feelings on stuff, you know.
Write up your lily.
Yeah. And I get the one thing and I'm like, there's nobody around me. So I'm like, God, what do you want from me? You know, I enjoy this. I love watching the joy on my kid's face. You know, what am I missing? And it hit me like a ton of bricks that day. You're going to be a pastor. It's like, no. And I didn't feel worthy. I'd read a lot about David and, you know, who he was. I looked up to him as a character in the Bible that I was kind of like, I understand him being chased by Saul, you know. He was like the special forces in the Bible, you know. Saul goes to relieve himself and David cuts off a piece of his shirt tail. I'm like, that's me, you know. But there's also a point where he says, I felt like in the Bible it was telling me that he told David, you're not going to build my temple because you have too much blood on your hands. So when he called me to be a pastor, I didn't feel hurt. And so first of all, I'm like, I've done way too much evil. You know, I never done anything evil, but I removed a lot of evil from this world. And I've never lost sleep over that. But I've lost a ton of sleep over some of the things I've done, wasn't able to do. Not what I did, but what I wasn't able to do. I wasn't able to save the 5 guys that got blown up. I wasn't able to follow directions good enough, and somebody got hurt because of it. So in those moments, I have a lot of blood on my hands. I'm like, I'm not worthy I'm not worthy to teach your word. And I think that's where my couch comes from. Like, I wasn't worthy enough. But then I got this call to be a pastor. I'm like, and I'm talking to a few people there that I met. What'd you get out of your study? I'm like, I think I'm called to be a pastor. I'm like, ooh, are you scared about that? I'm like, I'm scared to tell my wife. I don't think she thought she married a pastor. And so, I sit on it for a little while and I pray about it. I talked to my pastor at the time, and I asked him, I was like, this calling I feel, could it just be emotions? He said, not with you, Craig. I just don't think it is. And I said, well, what advice do you have for me? He said, if you can do anything else and be happy, you should do that. And so I talked to Jodie and I said, I think, and I kind of, what you would say, soft-footed around her. I said, I think I'm called to be a pastor. And she said, what'd you just say? I think I'm called to be a pastor. She said, no, you're not. She said, I did not marry a pastor. You are not a pastor. And she was upset about it. And I knew she would be because, I hadn't lived the life of a pastor. A lot of things were coming out at this time of, my past and things that had happened. And just as I started to get clear of things, then now I'm being called to be a pastor. So, that was definitely a time that was a struggle. That was a struggle because I had a lot of me to get out of the way, and I had pushed a lot of me in places that I didn't even know I stuck it. There's situations I remember through counseling, even now, like I'm going, oh yeah, that happened, and so I still have to repent of it, or I have to, God brings it to the forefront of my mind, and I have to pray about it and say, man, I'm sorry about that. I still have those episodes, but probably the last 7-8 years, it's been a lot better. Yeah. So, how did you see that?
I think you are more open with your feelings now to explain what your actions were back then. So like you can sit there and say, it's because I had all this trauma and everything that goes with it. Back then it would look very rebellious and very, then I'm not, like you're fighting it. Definitely when you called and said that you're called to be a pastor, I'm like,
that wasn't crazy.
Because we were so far removed from that level of responsibility that I felt like we needed to be at. And I knew I had to come up because if he called you to be a pastor, I knew that I would, we're together, we're one. And so we would have to get things right. Different mindset, not right, because you don't come to him perfect. But I had to change my mindset as now this is my responsibility. I'm held accountable for higher accountability.
Can I ask you, on that note, how did you understand that? So it feels like it was a seamless understanding. Not that you were accepting of it in the beginning, but seamless understanding of, okay, we are one. I'm his wife, and I can't be left behind the scenes. So it's somewhere in your mind, you connected the dots that pastoring does not mean that oh, I'm the little wife who stays home with the kids, but like, no, I'm called to a higher standard as well. Where did that come from?
That's a good question. I think the pastor that we were under was very old school. Not, and I'm not in a bad way, but very, the woman supports the man kind of situation. And watching other older couples in the church probably solidified that, because you had the pastor and his wife. The wife always supported the pastor, but the wife was always out there with the pastor. I don't like to be in front of people. And so when he's like, I have to be I'm called to be a pastor, I'm like, well, then I have to be out there with you. And I don't want to be out there with you. I want to be behind the scenes. Like, leave me at home. Like, I'm okay being at the house. But watching the other people in our church who had roles of authority in their wives, I saw that dynamic.
The reason I ask is it's just such a unique perspective nowadays, in the days of feminism and anti-masculinity or toxic masculinity or whatever. You and I think of Kathy Bolton as well. There's been a couple of times where I've had a conversation with her, and she'll say it's not passive. It's very aggressively active in the way she says it. I'm going to check with my husband first. And it's not, I need his permission. It's, we need to be in agreement on this. And I think that's almost a lost art in marriages. Not that everybody's like that, but I feel like that's a big issue. So you're going into ministry, which, most men aren't called to that. And they need to thank God for that. But when a man says, I feel like God's calling me to start a new job or start a business or whatever, it can be very hard for a wife to say, okay, then I need to come along with you, rather than, okay, that's your thing, I'll stay behind the scenes. So I just want to commend you on that. Even at a younger age, not knowing everything you know, you obviously had some examples in your life that showed you this is what a faithful wife looks like, even to Craig Crowe of all people. And I think that's one of the things I've really valued about y'all. We've had conversations behind the scenes about you. We loved gossiping about you, but no, just how synergistic you both are. You both have unique giftings. You both have unique talents. And somehow, when we get you both in the same room, man, power comes on. But then at the same time, Jodie, I've seen you grow in a way that, not independently from Craig, but it's because you've been so in sync with what the Holy Spirit's doing together in ministry. And now it looks like you've grown to this level of, I'm not trailing behind you. We literally are one. And so I just want to say, that's very commendable, especially in ministry. It doesn't always happen like that.
I don't think a lot of people realize how tough Jodie is.
Yeah, agree.
Number one, to be married with me, and pretty much the first 20 years of her life having to deal with a fist fight every night because I'm having some weird dream and I don't even know where I'm at. I'm in the sands of Afghanistan, fighting off camel spiders or something, and she's trying to kick me out of the bed, telling me to wake up, Funny thing, that was one of our rules when we went to youth camp, was nobody wakes up Craig. I know if you want to play a prank, don't play it on Craig,
Smart.
And if they needed to wake me up, they would go get Jodie. They'd get all the boys out of the cabin, and then they'd have Jodie come in and wake me up, because I'd crash out. I'd be the first one up and the last one to bed till Wednesday. And then I had to catch about 4 hours of sleep to catch up. And so they all, all the older boys knew, just don't wake him up. You just don't touch him, and let's go get Jodie. And Jodie would come in and wake me up. But people don't, they see her in a light that is very untelling of who she really is. Because to be married to me, number one's probably the toughest thing out there. I'm not easy, everybody gets the counseling Craig, the pastor Craig, the nice Craig, the servant style Craig. She does not. She gets the raw Craig, and she still loves me because of it. And that's something for me can't be replaced. And so when I think of someone I want to be my helpmeet, there isn't nobody else. And that's gives us a synergy that's most people can't have, because there's nobody else that would fill that role.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's where that synergy comes from me. It's just because I wouldn't trust anybody else with my back like that.
I agree. I don't know another woman who would give you that opportunity. Okay, let me ask one last question. I was just thinking, because you've been in ministry for so long together. Give me what is one of the high points being in ministry together from a ministry perspective, and then what was one of those low points in a ministry perspective that you both looked at each other like, are we really called to do this? You can start with whichever one.
High points, being in ministry this long, is to see a young person that you have poured into that you thought wasn't listening at all. Like you thought, there's no way that kid even heard me.
We're all three thinking of the same person. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and then to come out, 5 years later, just becoming a warrior for the Lord, winning people to Christ, FaceTiming me, giving me a sermon, Craig, I want you to hear this sermon I wrote. And you're just like, okay, well, give me a minute. Let me get some coffee. High points are when you realize it all just isn't done for nothing. You see the kids slip out. My kid's been in your youth group for 5 years. Now all of a sudden you see them on Instagram and they're doing drugs and stuff like that, But when you see the ones that, man, they got a family now, they're leading their family, they're taking them to church, they're raising their kids, they're homeschooling, they're doing things like just you didn't see back then that you're just so proud of them. Those are high points.
Yeah. You agree?
Yes.
Is there a different one for you?
It's about pouring into the kids 100% and watching them grow, and watching their love for the Lord just grow. It's when they get it. It's the light bulb.
Yeah.
It's when the light bulb goes off, and it's not rules. It's relationship. And to this day, that's what I love to watch, is when they transition from that rules to relationship.
And the reason we say kids is usually everybody's younger than us that you're talking to. So,
what about the most challenging? What's the most challenging being in ministry for this long?
I have one.
go ahead.
The most challenging, probably not longevity, but in the beginning, not being equipped. To be able to, for when people coming for counsel, for you not to understand, hey, I need to ask more questions. This person is coming to you saying they don't feel a certain way, but not having the training or the knowledge or the background to say, okay, why? To ask the why questions. Because we were taught early on, you don't ask why questions because it's intrusive. You don't want to step on their toes. You don't want to do, but having that training, I think that's one of the low points of it, is looking back in my early ministry, not having the wisdom and to be able to understand the situation and to be able to understand the people's hearts.
That's good. What about you, Greg?
Yeah, we never got an easy kid. I mean, when you say easy kid, there's always something traumatic in their life, special needs, and so very first camp, we're with, I don't know, I think we had 14, 15 kids, and it's me and Jodie and one other counselor, and we had a young lady come up to us and say she had been sexually abused. This is like the first night of camp, we're like, is there someone here? And then like, we have to go through that. We're completely, no tools, no toolbox, no, how do I even address this? What do we do?
Yeah.
And so low points are when someone comes to you, even if it is something you've been through dramatically. I've been through that. It's still not not having the wisdom to help them to the next, help them, not drag them out, but definitely don't push them any deeper in the hole. I think low points in ministry is when you see someone that you're wanting to help, whether that's they're in a sin they can't, that they're just, you're just now finding out about, or something so it's terrible's happened to them, loss of a loved one, loss of the things that happen to them, and you just, you don't have that tool to fix it.
Yeah.
You just have to sit in it with them. I'd say that's low points of ministry.
Yeah.
Because you take that on because they're coming to you for help. They're coming to you for guidance. They're coming to you for, what do I do next? And you don't have it.
Yeah.
No, that's probably the low points for me. And I think that's what she's expressing too.
Yeah.
But I think we've learned sometimes it's just sitting in it with them for a little bit. And talking about their next step and getting there. But you don't ever want to see anybody struggle with that. When they won't even repent of the sin, and you see the things in their life that it's just tearing them apart, and you're like, this is your problem. And they're like, that's not the problem. You're like, it's your problem, and those type of moments are the lowest points. Cause I know in my life and in our marriage, the things that we have rawly brought to the table, when it's a rawness and you're just tired of chewing on it, and you finally get it out there and talk about it and get the correct tools or however you want to look at that, and you deal with it, that's when true healing occurs.
Yeah. And
I just seeing those points in people's lives that they're just sitting there and that the wound keeps festering. They're not putting any kind of medicine on it and things like that. You're just like, that's the low point for me, because I know how bad it hurts,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we've had this conversation behind the scenes before. I mentioned that, a pastor who said ministry sometimes is like two locomotives in a head-on collision. They're on the same track, and you're the only one who sees it, and you're waving your arms at the conductors going, stop, slow down, change track. And they just look at you and wave, and then just in slow motion, you watch the implosion. And I always used to think that was so negative. And then I got into ministry and I thought, oh, this is accurate sometimes. But then, as you said, then sometimes those same people who were in that head-on collision with something walk away partially unscathed or rehabilitate, give their lives to the Lord, and they're on fire. And you're going, where was this 10 years ago? So, yeah, that's a really great perspective. Could you do this before we close? I always like to ask guests if they'll pray. Craig, would you mind praying for men who are watching, men in our church who not necessarily are called to ministry, but have that sense of purpose? And they probably don't have the same background as you. You're very unique, but they do have that. They have some trauma. They have some depth that they don't want to address. They want to stay on the couch. Would you just pray a prayer of maybe spurring them on and just encouragement the Lord could work in them and they could really follow after what he's calling them to do?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Father, I just come to you today for those men who are watching, families who are watching, Father, that there's a call in their life to be the priest, the provider, and the protector of their homes. Father, maybe they're doing one of those really good. Maybe they think they're not doing any of them. But they feel that call in their life. They feel that moment, the time to step up. Father, I pray for courage. Father, I pray just to put a fire under them. Father, that they get up and they just do the next best thing. Father, that they find that, seeking that out in their life, like, what do I need to do next? Those are the biggest questions. Sometimes, Father, it's just getting up and making the bed. Sometimes, Father, it's getting up and finding that job. It's getting out of the job that you're at. It might be starting a business. It might be, it's my turn to take the kids to this appointment. It's my turn to step up and make sure my wife has these things. Lord, that's the calling on our lives. You call us to be the priest in the home. You call us to be the protector and the provider. And Father, you give us that heart. And for those men that aren't striving for that, they don't see that, but they feel it. Father, I pray that you just put direction in their minds. You put that calling on their life that this is for me. I'm going to stand up and be the priest in my home. I'm going to stand up and provide for my family. Father, and I pray for the ones watching that feel that the wives can come alongside them. And Father, for those ones that don't have a wife, or maybe this is for a young man who feels a calling on his life, that you prepare that woman for him. Father, that before he was formed in the womb, you knew him. And Father, you knew who she was. And Father, just to keep him focused on being that priest first, Father, being that provider, setting a home, he goes to prepare a place for us. Well, it's our job as men to prepare a place for her. And Father, I just pray this onto their hearts, onto their minds, onto the forefronts of their minds, that they pick up their Bible, they follow you, and they seek this. Father, and I just ask that in your Son's heavenly and precious name, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your transparency. Thank you for all you do in the ministry as well. I think people don't realize all that you do. And so I just want to say thank you as your pastor. Thank you for being great Connect Group directors. We've had people who have laid foundation and started building. And in the past year, it's just been amazing to see what you've been able to produce. And just thank you for your faithfulness. Really appreciate it. But I really believe, I think I've always said there's more to what God's called you to. And I love that this is just one step in the journey. And I really am praying that there's some men and some women who hear this and say, all right, we got to have a get off the couch moment in our marriage.